So it's Swami Avadhut tonight on Theistic Media Show, and Anukrishna is with us. She's staying in our ashram. She's a professor from Hungary. She studied music and theory of the music and sound, and we decided today we'll speak about divine sound.
Yes.
Well, let's just speak on sound in general. As a musician and somebody who studied theory of the sound, what can you say about this wonderful phenomenon?
I would start from its origin, that the sound, what can we hear, that's one thing, but what we cannot hear, that's another important thing. And there are many studies, they did many studies. There are persons who can hear more sounds, more wide sounds.
Sound range?
Yes, more wide sound range. And like animals can hear higher sounds than people can hear, or lower sounds that people can hear.
Oh, well, I mean, we know that older people, they get this kind of a sound machine injected to their ear, but what is the process of sound on physical level? Interesting.
Yes, in physical level, it comes in a wave,
Uh-huh.
then goes to the ear,
Yes,
hits the eardrum,
yes.
then goes through that, I don't know really in English, but yes,
Ear
then
canal.
goes through the ear canal, and then arrives to the brain, to the receptors, and the receptor transfer it into the brain, and that's how we hear.
Well, you know, it's an interesting point that there is a different quality of the sound. Sometimes when we go to some kind of a coffee place or some environment, and we feel sometimes very disturbing sounds, we also can see the different groups of people. They identify by sound. You know, the rock music people, their particular type. Then, you know, the people who love classics or Indian music. So we can say that sound also can be in different moods of nature. According to Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literature, we can understand there are different stages of nature, which is called gunas. So the Tama guna, ignorance. There's sound that represents ignorance. There's Raja guna, there's sound that represents passion, you know, especially like flamenco and all kind of dance, which very sensitive, very, you know, male-female oriented. But there's also, you know, kind of like sattvic sound, ambient sound, very sweet, very pleasant, and I believe Indian music is represented in many ways, ragas and special meditational sound, and of course the divine sound theory. So, but let's, what do you think about Indian music?
I think Indian music is a very large, how can I say that? Subject, yes.
Well, we're talking about specifically sattvic representation.
Sattvic representation is a very high level of music in general, and we even study it in the music academy, that it's in the books that the Indian mantras have healing effects, and it's so much important thing that they write even in the scientific books about this. And these singing mantras they put into medical practice and healing practice too. And Indian music has a very special ancient root.
Well, here's what I can say, what I've heard about. First of all, what you've said is right, the healing power of the mantra, but they call them Naimitika mantra, means they're not fully spiritual, but they're almost spiritual and then have certain positive effect on a matter. So when the purely spiritual sound can totally be connected with the soul, which is a very subtle part of consciousness, which we'll talk about later. But one thing I can say, in the 16th century, 17th century, there were science called cymatics, mainly studied by Germans. It was German musicians and physicists who would take a piece of metal, apply some sand, and play with the violin bow and produce particular sound. And by the frequency of particular sound, that scent would take different parts of and different forms, like mandala, like different shapes. So and they were studied that how they can make particular sound that takes particular shapes. So, which is interesting for me. According to Vedic theory, the divine sound connect with divine form. Mm-hmm. But mundane sound can also produce mundane form or destroy particular form. That's why, so as we can say, sound by which we can create, there's also sound by which we can destroy things. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting point. Different physicists, they would think about different type of sound weapons, which produce psychological effects. Different sound that you can drill, holes with, or ultrasound where you can. And there's some particular sound which really affects like insects or mice, different types of insects, or different type of even small animals. They can't tolerate it, and you just like you said, you're okay because you don't just hear it, some noise. So as we can say, sound is a very unique element. And, well, as a musician, what do you experience about sound?
It's that cymatic part which produce the forms. Actually, musicians can just feel those forms. Like, I know when I play something that it would give a nice shape or like a mandala, or I know when I hear something like tamaguna music, I know for sure that if we make a proof like cymatics or the water crystal picture, it will give a very ugly form. And it's very interesting how it's possible to feel and to know. But that's also very interesting that like artists need to have this capacity that when they go on stage, pick up their instrument, at that moment we have to just become that thing what we will show to the persons.
Of course. But I can tell you one of my experience, and sometimes when I would be, child, I would go for classical music with my mother or father, and I would discover certain things that sometimes people sleep under classical music. They go in some kind of a trance. They're kind of freaking out. They're kind of disconnect. So what I understood, there are different frequency of sound, but particular sound make people like knocked out. Or one thing I can say, they don't have enough conscious power to connect with, especially very pure or very sattvic sound. What do you think about that phenomenon?
It happens sometimes. I can see someone sleeping during a concert. What you said, it's very interesting. I actually never thought about this, that they don't have the conscious capacity to receive that kind of music.
Yes.
I think it's like they're just not on that level that they could appreciate something like that.
Right, but there are like many people.
So I just offended many people.
No, you're not offending them, but I think we can understand that the sound has magical power. For those who can connect with the sound, they get the concept. See, because what we believe is the form, sound connect with the form, but we should also say that the sound also connect with the concept, with the idea, and sound also connect with a particular dynamic idea. So therefore, see, when we talk about divine sound, there are different mantras, as you said, and they definitely have unique effect applying to people consciousness. But in Krishna consciousness, we're talking about Maha Mantra, which is the most special mantra of the all, because it's Krishna himself. It's technically God himself. So if God has a form, an idea, and he's a conscious being, he must also have a sound representation, like everybody have sound representation by their name, just like you, Anukrishna.
Yeah.
And to someone it's meaningless, but for someone it's deep meaning. So it's a very important when you call people in this world by their name. Nobody would like to, when they say, hey, you, or you can say generally, but when you're in close connection with somebody, what's your name? Like, you want to know the name. And the name automatically match with a particular personality, identity. Therefore, they have, many, there's also internet sites where you can search meaning of your name. Mm. And most likely you'll see that name has a particular character and particular energy behind. So everything connects with the concept, form, sound, idea, and on divine plane, where as a theist we would say God exists, he also exists in consciousness, in particular form, in particular sound, and his divine sound is Maha Mantra. So therefore, we can say many people are sleeping when they hear Maha Mantra because they cannot connect with the concept. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to re-wake them. It doesn't mean if people do not connect with the sound, they don't have to go to music halls and hear classical music. They may keep hearing, and at certain level they get some connections with the divine sound. So what do you think about that?
I think that, as you mentioned, if they keep hearing, it works like when you produce music. First time maybe you cannot play something because you don't have the concept in your brain, heart. But once you get the concept, then you start to practice. Even listening is one kind of practice.
Of course.
And then practice with your fingers, then practice with your fingers and your heart. So that's, if it works from the musician's part, like get the concept and practice and play, then it must work from the listener side too.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually what you said, I'm just thinking about what you said. As a musician, when you perform, you have to become that what music is. You have to become the music itself. You have to become form itself. And how can you do that? Like, you have your own identity, but then you need to play music and produce particular sound, and you have to take form of the sound. Doesn't sound to you very like abstract? Or
it is abstract. That's why musicians have some kind of different thing. It's like when you go on stage or when you will perform, it feels like to enter in one kind of aura, and it feels like a little like shining in your heart, but when you start to play, it grows, and it grows that much that all the audience is inside.
So, well, when you say the word aura, I understand it's kind of like, I would just say it's kind of like more like a conscious stage where you consciously connect with others.
Yes.
Because see, everything is ultimately connected on particular plane. Like, all devices are networking devices, and there's particular frequency which is unified for all of us. So, like for instance, different concepts or different ideas, we can connect on different conscious frequency. Or sometimes there are some very high things which we can't process by mind, but we can process by heart, by soul itself. They're very simple. Like sometimes people get connection with animals. without really communicating their language or their way. Or sometimes people get connections with trees or, flowers. And the sound is a great tool to connect, actually.
Yes. In medical practice, there are many children, mainly children with autism. I think that's the English expression, autism. They are not able to communicate with words or with movements, but many times it's very easy to get a communication with them with like using the music.
Yeah, it's great. It's an interesting point, but when I've studied history, what I realized at a different stage of different political or social stage, several countries, let's say World War II, Hitler or Stalin or any nation would come up with their own song, with their own hymn, with their own sound. Like every country has national hymn. And so when they would be totally useless, they would, sing the song. Even if you look at the film, The Pirates of Caribbean, I think third one, it's an interesting beginning where British government playing to hang pirates, and they all just stay in line waiting to be prosecuted. And that's where they start singing song. And with the particular song, they overcome fear of death. And you can see they're like all coming up with their concept. So, at the time of revolution where somebody be like, stay by the wall and get, prosecuted, they would like start singing song. And that would change their consciousness, change their ideals. So power of music.
Yes.
Power of sound.
In another, I'm again back to the medical practice because I used to do that. So that's one of my personal experience that children and young adults with cancer, when they realize they really will die, and it will happen soon, they also get much closer to music, and it helps them to maybe that braveness they gives them.
So when you die, get the music. But what kind of music? What kind of you recommend? What kind of sound? What kind of sound you would recommend before somebody's dying, huh?
I would recommend Maha Mantra.
Why?
Because that's the supreme, and it brings us close to our home.
Yeah. Well, you said very interesting thing. Close to our home. Can it actually take us home, and on which stage?
I think it depends on how much mercy we got, and.
But in the sound world, how we can calculate that?
In a sound world, because this is the supreme, I believe it has the magnet capacity. Like we have inside in our heart, this, if we have it sincerely, it's like one part of the magnet, and our original home is the other part of the magnet, and it must connect.
So, what I understood, sound has the form. It also has magnetic power to draw one consciousness or one attention, and well, what it comes is like, how does the sound connect with consciousness? What would you say about that?
I need to think about it. Sound connects to consciousness. It's difficult to decide which one is first, if the sound is first or consciousness, because there must be an original sound, which we feel through consciousness.
Well, in Vedas, it's very clearly about Om. Om is where the old Vedas start. See, they would not read Veda, they would chant Veda and memorize. Veda, it's knowledge, it's a pure flow of consciousness. And when we say about Om, we say it's like big yes. And because Om represents all kinds of level of divinity, personal aspect, Bhagavan, impersonal aspect, Brahman, and all-pervasive aspect, which is Param Atma, which is in every atom. So ultimately, we can say the whole reality can be in one sound form. That's why yogis, they like to chant this Om sound. And it's so funny, you go to any yoga school, before people start doing physical exercise, everybody's like, Om. Can you do it? Om. But it's like no meaning. And then everybody's like working hard to your leg behind. So that's actually showing how much people are gross. Because they can't get the subtle form. Because if you really see like the higher yogi, that's all they do. They're like, oh, and they're even an internal vibration. But on a very physical, grossly oriented people who can't connect with reality, they need to feel on a physical plane. Everything they want to have, love, perfection, everything has to be physically felt. If you don't feel this like on physical gross plane, that means it doesn't exist. But is it truth?
Yes.
Is it truth? I think it's not truth. I think the sound on the pure level is more connected with your heart consciousness and the consciousness beyond physics. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. See, just like what you've said is very important in the beginning of our talk, like people don't get particular frequency of sound. Mm-hmm. So when you exist on gross material plane, you don't experience more subtle plane of reality, which is real. It doesn't become unreal because you don't feel it. Actually, it's more real and it's more substantial, and it's more subtle. So what Vedas explain to us that we live in a very, very gross plane, a very gross consciousness, very gross sound, very gross existence, and as you're going more subtle, it's become more refined. Therefore, in the mantras like Gayatri mantra, they're representative of different levels of sound. Bhurbhuva, Swaha, Tapa, Jhana, Loka. And each sound has a particular subtle frequency. And just like when you said has a healing effect, each sound has more and more conscious effect. Mm-hmm. But the interesting point is not that. That's like a very common thing. So the interesting point, how does sound go into the plane of spirituality where there is no matter? So how is this divine sound, which is Krishna mantra, Krishna Nam, comes down? See, because what we vibrate with our physical tongue, with our physical ear, just like you and I try, like, oh, it was like, nothing was there. Okay? Not to be truthful. So you have to have that very subtle conscious frequency to be able to vibrate the mantra. And see, the practice of mantra, it's not make you more qualified. It's about consciousness which make you more like as a receiver. You can't produce the sound by yourself. You can only be a receiver. So most people think, oh, if I chant mantra, I can produce this frequency of sound. That's not truth. Mm-hmm. You have to become very, very clear receiver. You agree with me?
Yes, I just was thinking on the first verse of Shikshashtakam Chetu Darpanamarjanam.
Yes.
We need to be cleaned actually
Yes.
to receive this sound, and then
Right, but take this on this level. As much as we can clean ourselves with the sound, that as much as we can do. As we become a receiver, the sound comes from higher level. So in other words, this Om, this is like cosmic vibration. So that's why they say, those who practice deep spiritual practices, they say first mantram, Hare Krishna mantram, will clear your brain. Brain means mind.
Mhm.
Then it comes down to your heart. So then it has position connections with your subtle self, with your soul. It bridges over your ego, your intellect, and affect plane of the soul. That's where the mantras become something substantial, real, because this is divine vibration, comes from higher plane. And then on the highest level, you see everything in this vibration. See the spiritual persons, it says in scriptures, they can see Krishna everywhere. Why? Because this vibration, the sound and form, it exists everywhere in the world, but it's hidden from gross consciousness. Just like so many here, cell phones, televisions, Wi-Fi, we can't see with our open senses, but we know it's there because we have the, instruments, the computers. We can look at our phone and we can say, oh, like, does it show me any frequency? So the ability to realize this frequency is faith, is belief. We have to believe. So believe it's not something superficial. Believe it's something very, very deep, and it's a deep conscious stage. It's a very substantial reality to believe. And I'm sure you had many experiences with belief.
in like musical level, or
Of course.
yes, like when someone plays something very difficult, just happening with me, and it looks like impossible to play, but we need to practice, and if we practice and believe that it will come out somehow from our instrument, then it just happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to ask you also a question, because see, you've been dealing with very sick children and tried to give them nourishment through sound. How did it work with them? Those who's on the verge of dying, or?
Not all of them died, but it works in a very intense way. I also was surprised how it works. Like, they are really sick, feeling very bad, and most of them are depressed because of their condition, and simply by choosing the right music to them, make them play something, I think it's the vibration which goes into them and move something, like something life, move the life inside and the will to live.
But are those dying children, do they had any experience of afterworld? Do they believe in higher consciousness? Or they, on some level, realizing that what happened to them now is part of their karma? Or
They were all kind of persons. Some of them were really coming from gross family, as you said, who didn't have the capacity to appreciate music. I think in some level they also get some benefit, but it was more useful for those who were in a higher level already.
mm,
And one of the girls, she was 19, and she really got this power of the music. She told me many times that actually this is what keeps me still going on, still not lose her like willing to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting point. See, especially the young people who are connected with the sound culture, they all love different kind of music. Sometimes when I go to metro, I see some young kids sitting and hearing some electronic music. He's like everybody wants to hear a particular sound vibe to get them going. And especially trance culture, when you take drugs and you go and you get particular vibration. I think it's very close to what we are. In fact, what we try to do is has nothing to do with drugs, and has nothing to do with even gross mundane sound. See, our specialty is in Bhakti Yoga, we're trying to connect with very subtle sound, which you can't achieve by any superficial means. Because really you have to make yourself a receiver. You can't intoxicate yourself and think you are a receiver. Actually, you can only become real receiver. And so if you are only perceiving on level of intoxication, that's kind of delusion. Mm-hmm. So you're deluded. You're not really that. You think you are that. So my personal realization, many people, they think they figured some secret of the sound, but really they don't understand. It's a very, very complicated spiritual process to be able to fully realize potency of the sound.
Yes, and one other interesting thing connected to this, that many times great classical musicians, I think they got some higher connection with music, but they are not developed spiritually enough to deal with it, and so they really became an instrument when they show something, and after that they go and get drunk because they just cannot handle this changing.
Oh, so what you're trying to say is an interesting point. So when you get some higher, many times happened to me. I mean, not on the stage of getting drunk, but I feel when I am particular reality plane, but I can't properly digest, I have to go down. So it's interesting what you said. So that means there's musicians who were producing particular sound, but they had quite ego, I would say, right? So we're talking about ego?
Yeah.
Ego and sound. So that ego will make them go down. Am I correct?
Yes.
So then can you explain why?
Because they think they are the producer and they made something, but when they get out from this, I cannot really express it with words.
No, it's ego, me and I,
Yeah.
Ego, that is called false ego. That's what makes think that you are the instrument. Just like we spoke about mobile phone. If mobile phone think he's the ultimate reality, but he's just a part of it. He's a small provider to one person. And, we know in spiritual plane, ego is the biggest enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's very difficult to really realize, because, see, when we're doing kirtan, means chanting mantras, the spiritual songs. Most people now also like kirtan. They like to come and chant, and they feel relaxed, they feel good, they feel some presence of sattvic, of bliss. But really it's their influence of their ego.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when you hear some monk or some devotee chanting, his singing is not maybe pleasant from mundane ear, but it has very powerful effect because he's sincere.
Mm-hmm.
So he's, especially with Prabhupada, when you hear Prabhupada songs, then you would understand. Prabhupada is not a great musician. Actually, his sound very strange because he's not a singer. But when you hear, like especially his Shad Goswami Ashtaka, he's singing about one, it's like, it's an amazing harmony that comes from such unharmonious. Okay, we'll hear that from such unharmonious music. Is so much harmony is coming. So we have a question in the studio.
So we have a question. The Vedanta Sutta says, Anavriti Shabda, by sound we shall become liberated. How can we understand this in the modern world?
Oh, it's a great question. Then first we have to understand, the sutras say we can get liberated by the sound. Well, just what we were speaking about, sound is a particular presentation of consciousness. So when we say about what is liberation, how can we liberate it? Liberation to us means particular stage of consciousness. And at this point, this very, very moment, we mix within mundane consciousness. We mislead spiritual and mundane. We have no understanding of our internal divine nature, and we don't really understand this world, which is, technically speaking, virtual world. So it's not that being in virtual world, we are deluded by virtual world itself, as rather we delude by our understanding of what this world is. So being liberated by sound means have a particular consciousness which totally separate us from gross material existence. So therefore, most people think to liberate means to achieve God, means to die. So they clearly understand that their liberation is not to be connected with matter. But in our spiritual understanding, we think if you're a liberated person, why not to be connected with matter? But rather exploring this matter for your own self-benefit, to be a servant and to be part of that divine nature which you are intrinsically, which you are. And that's called Sankirtanam. So when we're coming to this world, and it's very interesting questions because we have very interesting process to get liberation. It's not like we chant Om and we become liberated. Although maybe to a particular conscious person, you can be liberated from one mantra. And matter of fact, that's what they say. When your mind and senses become purified, that's what will ultimately happen. You will hear divine sound, and through that you will experience not only your true self, not only your soul, the Atma, you'll be also experience the divine plane, which is very ecstatic, dynamic, and beautiful. So liberation for us does not mean end of the world. It actually means beginning of the world. And that's where the divine sound will not only free us, rather become as our guide. It's an interesting point because they say Gayatri Mantram is the sound of Krishna flute which come down in this world. And we know army. In army, they would direct the whole army by horn, by sound. So when they say that means for everybody wake and get your job done. And if they say like attack, and if they say means like stop attack, right? So it's kind of like sound directing your activity, because in army they wouldn't have mobile phones, they wouldn't have. It's an interesting thing. In ancient armies, they would blow conch shells, and everybody would have his own conch shell. And some of the conch shells were gifts of gods in Mahabharata. Some of the conch shells were divine. And also we know Krishna's conch shell is divine. So he's producing divine sound, which is liberating for everybody. But in Mahabharata, get liberated means to be killed by the good guys. So death is partial liberation, but the biggest death is death of our ego. So we are mainly thinking is how to destroy our ego. See, because as we say, sattva guna is most dangerous stage, because sometimes it's very difficult to detect where's the true self, where's the ego, because ego is very tricky. It's always, illusion is always cheating us. As more close we come to the settled point, it's more tricky and Maya becomes. Have you ever felt anything about being connected with Maya?
All the time.
All the time?
I'm feeling, yes.
How you get along with each other?
With Maya?
With Maya, yes. See, I have big problems with Maya, but we're trying to
With respect. I accept that she is there, respect, and I try to focus on what I receive from my gurus, and I try to follow that.
Acha. So Maya is okay. It's an interesting point, because Maya is also has connection with divine sound. And they tell when Haridas Thakur were chanting his Mahamantra, Maya herself appeared in front of him and showing him very erotic, postures and gestures. And of course, for men, Maya is women. For women, Maya is man. So since he was a man, Maya took very beautiful erotic form, and she's want to seduce him. But he just said, well, let me finish my chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And she would hear it. And then finally she revealed herself I am the material illusion, and I'm deluding everyone, including great sages. But you're so great that I'm deluded by your sound, I'm charmed by your sound, I want that mantra. And she's begging for initiation, and he gave her initiation. That's an amazing point. So Maya, she's also Hare Krishna. She is a devotee, a great devotee. That's why I ask you how you get along. You are a good devotee, and she also a good devotee. Then you must be friends. But what you said about respect, I think is very important. So we're talking about divine sound. We got the very good questions from one of our viewers in New York, and we continue our real-time show. There might be more questions in the audience tonight. Ну давайте, пацаны, утки, что вы сидите как депрессивные. Okay. Bhakti Lalita.
Anukrishna is always fascinated about Krishna's flute song, and especially one particular note. She's always meditating on that. And tell us, what is this compelling feeling that you always have and always want to know about?
I read in Golden Vulcan of Divine Love that there is the fifth note of Krishna's flute. There is a chapter, very short chapter, and the title is The Fifth Note of Krishna's Flute. And when I read that, it just attracted me so much.
Can you remind what it's all about? So it may attract not only you, also our viewers.
And I always would like to hear about that, but I know I'm not qualified to, but now maybe we can. And that chapter actually doesn't tell really much about. I couldn't find anything. It tells that Krishna is playing his flute, and everyone hears that her seva, like Yashoda, Mother Yashoda hears, my son is hungry, and
just like we said, in an army, everybody knows what to do.
Yes.
So they're hearing the same music, but they're doing different work.
Yes.
So see, it's one sound, which can, by which hearing it, you realize exactly what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what it is? It means that it afflicts your consciousness towards your particular service. See, because they say, everybody wakes up, all the soldiers wake up, but every soldier has a particular duty that he's supposed to do, and he knows this duty.
Yeah.
So it's a particular command, which is sound like a general command, but it also can be perceived as individual command.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, when we're dealing with divinity, one of the beauty of Krishna consciousness that we're individual souls, we're individual beings, and we have our own individual connections with divinity. Although we can be serve in a beautiful group of numerous liberated souls, but we still will have our own individual service and connections with devotees, Krishna, the spiritual world, and that's what makes us separate from Mayavada or personalism. Mm-hmm. When they say, "Oh, you are just a drop of, you drop of ocean." So when we spoke about harmony, as Srila Maharaj many times mentioned, he say harmony is a musical term, but harmony achieved by many individual instruments playing same music. Mm. So it's not like ultimate one sound. It's the ultimate music that connects from many different instruments. And by, playing together for the same universal purpose, that's how spiritual world works. Although, those instruments individually different, and sometimes somebody have to just play a very short part, like so sometimes they're showing funny films in orchestra, there's some guy does it wrong, not at the proper time. Yes. And that one sound breaks everything. Yeah. So that means you have to follow the magical part of director. And Krishna is one of those directors that directs the music.
Yes, and I also heard Goswami Maharaj many times mentions that Krishna, when he plays his flute, mm-hmm. all the sounds coming out in the same time, like every sound, but not like when you just push every
yes
taste on a
not like Calcutta
piano.
Road, I understand.
No,
right.
It comes out, but in a very harmonious way.
Yes. And sometimes when you see an orchestra, some director, he only has two sticks. Do you understand? He is that music. And that's why the many famous orchestra, they have very famous director. Yeah. So Krishna is like that. It sounds like he's producing music, but he's using the whole creation for his divine purpose. And we spoke tonight about many wonderful things, including divine sound, but it's time to produce divine sound. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We had a beautiful program tonight, and we will end our program with divine sound.
Excuse me. We have a couple of messages. It's Dandavats to all of the fortunate listeners and viewers from Goswami Maharaj, and Dandavats from Teresa Lorraine de Mola.
Okay, so Srila Goswami Maharaj is very happy that by your grace we can be here in Theistic Media Center, which is one of your creation, a revolutionary spiritual network for those who are inspiring for spiritual consciousness and knowledge. And we've been speaking very simple topic today. I mean, the topic itself is not simple, but we spoke very simply, without any big ideas, just what we've heard from our books of Guru Varga, from your own explanation from Srila Gurudev, and very fortunate to be here with Anukrishna Didi. and very shy. That's such a great personality like yourself watching our shows, and of course all our devotees, our Dandavat Pranam and viewers of Theistic Media Center.